Today at the House of Hacks, we're going to talk about your very first image ever on your brand new camera. Let's get started. Hi makers, builders, and do-it-yourselfers. Harley here. Last week we went through unboxing a removable lens camera and all the things that were in the box. This week we're going to be looking at taking your very first image with that new camera. From the very beginning of what you need to do until the very end. So the first thing you need to do is the battery that comes in the box usually doesn't have a charge on it, or it has a very minimal charge if it has any. So when you first take it out, you want to take the plastic off, put it in the battery charger, and put it on the wall. So when you're ready to make an image, you have a charged battery. The next thing you want to do is put the memory card in. There's usually a door on the side of your camera or on the bottom, depending on your model of camera, and you want to put the memory in. The memory doesn't come with the camera, you have to buy it separately. So be sure you find out what kind of memory is required and get the right kind. Most of the new cameras use SD memory. Some of the older cameras will use CF cards. And the memory just slides into the slot designed for it in the camera. Some cameras will have 2 slots if that's an option for your particular camera. And then the door just closes up and snaps shut. The next thing to do is to put the battery in. So you take it off the charger, and it'll usually only go in one way, and it just kind of snaps in. There's usually a little lock that keeps it in, and then you close the door. The next thing you need to do is remove the body cap from the camera body, and then remove the back cover from the lens itself. And then the lens is ready to go on the body. There's usually either a red or a white dot on the camera body, sometimes both. And you'll also have either red or white dot on the lens, depending on the type of lens it is. You want to match up the color dot on the lens with the same color on your camera body and slide those together, and it'll have a tight fit like that. And then on a Canon, you want to turn it clockwise until it locks and you can't turn it back. On a Nikon, you want to turn it counterclockwise. I'm not sure on other models which way it turns, but you can figure that out from your user's manual. The next thing to do is take the lens cap off the front of the lens. There's 2 buttons on the side, and you just push those and it pops right off. And then we want to put the lens hood on. Now the lens hood also has a red dot on it and a red dot on the lens, and you want to line those up. There's usually also a red circle that isn't filled in, and you want to be sure to use the dot, the solid dot, and line that up with the solid dot on your lens. Again, it'll fit in flat against the lens, and you want to turn it 90 degrees clockwise until it locks into place. And that open circle lines up with the red solid circle when it's in the correct location. Next, we want to make sure that AF, or autofocus, is turned on, because for your first image, you want the camera to be doing the focusing. And if you have the option, you want to turn stabilization on. On Canons, that's called stabilization or image stabilization. I believe on Nikons, it's called VR, or vibration reduction. Whatever it's called on your camera, you want to make sure it's on if you have that option. You want to turn off autofocus in cases where either the autofocus isn't doing what you want it to do, or if you're shooting video. Frequently, you don't want the video to be focusing on you. You want to be have control of that yourself. And stabilization you want to turn on when you're shooting handheld, and you want to turn it off if it's on a tripod or a beanbag or some other stable surface that isn't moving. The next thing we want to do is put it in program mode. On the mode selector, that's usually colored green, and that will put the camera in full auto mode, so you don't have to think about the exposure or the focusing or anything like that. Any of the settings on the camera, it's all programmed for you. This is easy for your very first image. Next, we need to turn the camera on. On this particular body, it's on the top left corner, and it just switches over. I have other bodies where it is on the back on the bottom left. I know a lot of cameras, it's up next to the shutter release button. You have to look in your manual, find where it is on your particular camera. So to actually take the image, you want to use the heel of your palm and put that right next to the bottom of the camera. And that puts your fingers free to do things like focusing and zoom, and on some lenses also the aperture control is right there underneath your fingertips. Next, you want to put your right hand on the grip, and the index finger should fall naturally on top of the shutter release button. You want to put your elbows against your body. This gives you a nice stable position to shoot with. And you also want to have your feet about shoulder width apart. This gives you a stable platform to keep vibration down. When you put the camera up next to your face, your forehead can rest right on the edge of the viewfinder, and that gives you 3 points of contact with your camera to give you a good stable surface. So we look through the viewfinder and compose our image, get our zoom level the way we want, and then we press down halfway on the shutter release. When we do this, the camera does a number of things. It checks for exposure, it does focusing. In fact, if you listen, you can hear that beep. That beep tells us that we have focus. And in this particular case, I'm in a low lighting situation, and so the onboard flash pops up. So we push down halfway, we've got our elbows tucked in, and when we're ready to take the picture, we push the shutter release the rest of the way down. And we hear the click. Congratulations, you've just taken your first image. Now, the good side about the auto mode is it takes care of everything for you. The bad thing is sometimes you don't want everything taken care of for you. In this particular case, I'm taking a picture in a mirror, and the flash washes out the image. It reflects back at me, and it doesn't make the image look the way I want. So the second most important setting for a very beginning photographer is the P mode on this camera. And the camera will do everything for you with a few things that you can override. You can override the exposure compensation, which is something that we won't get into today, but again, you can look in your manual to find out more about that. And also, it won't automatically pop up the light for flashes. You have to manually pop up the light if you want a flash. So in this case, I put it in P mode and take another picture. And now we don't have the flash, but we still have a nice image because the camera has compensated for not having the flash. And so now that you've taken your first image, now what? There's a whole range of things that you can do with your images after you've taken your pictures. I know some people will just leave their images on the camera and pull their camera out when they want to look at them. When they fill their card up, they go back and delete old ones. This is certainly fine if that's what you want, but a lot of the reason that you take images is to save them and to send them to family and friends and post them online and things of this nature. So you want to get them off your camera. The easiest way is usually the cameras will plug directly into your computer, or you can get a card reader that will plug in your computer and you can plug the memory card directly into it. And then you can use special programs like Lightroom or Bridge or programs that come with your camera to copy the images off. I generally use either Windows Explorer on a PC or the Mac Finder on Mac operating systems to just copy them over. The memory cards just look like disks to the computer, so you can just copy them off using standard file manipulation programs. So once you have it on the computer, you need some sort of program to manipulate them. GIMP is a free software that you can get that is kind of equivalent to Photoshop. It works differently, but it does the same type of image manipulation. Photoshop is the other big gorilla in the photography world. Lightroom is another Adobe product that a lot of photographers use. You can use Lightroom and Photoshop in kind of conjunction with each other. A lot of people do that. They use Lightroom for kind of global changes and then Photoshop to go in and do specific changes in certain areas of the images. But that's a whole world in and of itself. There's channels dedicated to doing nothing but that. One that I find really valuable is called Flern. I'll leave a link to that up in the down in the description or up on the card. That's a great resource for Photoshop tutorials, and I highly recommend them. I have no affiliation with them. I just find them as a good resource. And finally, your camera in auto mode will save images in JPEG. And JPEG is a great image. It's ubiquitous across the web. It's kind of every program that wants images wants a JPEG image. The problem with JPEGs is every time you save them, the image quality degrades just slightly. The first couple times you won't notice the image change, but over time, if you continue to save the images, you will see quality go down on the image. And so the best way if you're going to be doing image manipulation is to shoot in RAW. This is a native format to the camera. It's different from one manufacturer to the other. So you need the manufacturer's software to convert from the RAW file to a format that programs like Photoshop and GIMP can use. But you can convert them to a format that is called lossless, and so you don't have image quality problems. The problem with RAW files is usually they're a little bit flat. They're not highly saturated. Sometimes they're not quite as sharp as a JPEG image will be. Your camera does a lot of processing when it saves JPEG images to make them look good. And so one thing that's great for beginners as an exercise is to configure your camera to shoot both RAW and JPEG files. This will give you a JPEG file that looks really good, but it'll also give you a RAW file that has all the information coming off the sensor that you can use for manipulation. And so a good first exercise is to load those both on your computer and learn how to manipulate the RAW image until it looks like the JPEG image. This will give you exposure to using curves, adjusting saturation, doing sharpening, some of the really basic fundamental things that you need to know when doing image manipulation in programs like Photoshop. So that's a great first introductory exercise to post-processing. Next week, I'm going to be doing 10 tips to better photos on the Sunday episode. And until next time, thanks for joining me on this creative journey that we're all on. And go make something. Perfection's not required, fun is.